is Hewie Rattray, the newly appointed CEO of Vinanz PLC. Great to be meeting and speaking to you, Hewie. Welcome onto StockBox. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's good to be speaking to you. I understand you've been involved with Vinanz, perhaps in the background for about a year, I think. So perhaps just tell us a little bit, first of all, about what you've been doing for Vinanz and what's led to you taking, the top man role.
I joined Vinanz as a consultant at the beginning of last year, and I have kind of been working in the intersection of capital markets and crypto since about 2015. Then, I was involved in the initial structure of KR1. I was a seed investor and raised a bit of money for Argo blockchain. I worked from Argo through all the way from 2017 through to 2022. When I saw David Lenigas had set up Vinanz, I got in touch with him and I said, I've had a lot of experience in the mining industry, a lot of experience in the crypto and Bitcoin industry specifically. And I feel like I could be a good help to you. And then, we've had a great relationship since then. Vinanz has obviously come on leaps and bounds over that period. And Dave asked me, if I'd be up for doing this. And I said, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to help. And I have my own vision for the company. And I think we can take it to good places.
Excellent. Well, I do want to talk about your vision in a moment, but just first of all, was there anything specifically that attracted you to get in touch with David and the company in the first instance? And what have you been doing in the background for the last year with the company?
I like, one of the things that I enjoy most kind of working in capital markets is identifying things that are kind of out of trend, which was Vinanz kind of at the beginning of last year or the end of 2023. Bitcoin was only, 35, 40K or something. And there wasn't really much of a bull market going on in crypto. But I think, those of us who work in the industry, we're very much expecting a very bullish 2024. And Dave had this perfect structure set up with Vinanz, where they had, a bunch of mining machines, they had a bit of Bitcoin, they had a low market cap on Aquis. And for me, for my personal ambitions, it's good to join companies that are small but growing and, are in a good industry that I enjoy and, that I have, that I'm bullish on.
Well, Vinanz is definitely a small market cap company, considering what they're doing on the London markets anyway. So what is your vision for the company? I guess the overall thing is to build that value in, but how will you plan to do that?
So I think we announced last week our capital raise, our first real big Bitcoin purchase, and kind of identified our Bitcoin treasury strategy and not moving away from mining, but running this in synchronization with the mining part of the business. So the primary thing I want to do is obviously expand the balance sheet with Bitcoin. And just to contextualize why that's important, I think in London, there's probably about $1.5 trillion or pounds of investable capital. Now, about 300 billion of that is long only London Stock Exchange equity money. That's like pension funds, UCITS funds, MiFID funds, all that kind of stuff. Now, that money really has no way to get real exposure to Bitcoin, right? Like that's a very specific pool of capital, and there's more or less no opportunities on the London Stock Exchange for them to get a nice tracker against Bitcoin. There's no ETFs. They can't invest in the States. They can't invest in MicroStrategy. So when I look at the pool of capital that I want to capture with this company, like that would be exactly it. And then you've got everyone, with SIPs and ISAs in the retail community, that are also going to be an essential part of the journey going forward. So, I want to create like a clear and investable narrative for institutions and retail and kind of refer to us as we are Bitcoin, but on the London Stock Exchange.
Okay. That is interesting because, of course, people could buy the underlying, but as you say, like pension funds, etc., or indeed SIPs or ISAs, you can't actually get that exposure unless you're through a PLC. How do you plan to market then to that market?
The best way that we can market the company is by basically continuing to aggressively finance ourselves and add Bitcoin to the balance sheet. I think people in the UK are really starved of Bitcoin exposure, and there is an education process, to go especially with the institutions in London and in this country, not many of them are orange pilled, as we'd say in the Bitcoin community. Like they don't really, we naturally lag behind America when it comes to this kind of technology and new innovative stuff. Since I've been in the crypto industry, the UK has been very to and fro about regulation and about what you could do. We used to be able to trade on Binance very easily, and now we more or less can't trade on Binance at all. So there's a bunch of, to get back to the point, there's a lot of education that needs to be done. And we would see ourselves at the forefront, and using that as a marketing angle for us, i.e. teaching people about Bitcoin, educating them about Bitcoin, and then bringing them into the story that we're creating with Binance.
Okay, and that's interesting. So I'm glad to see you've taken this role and you've got a plan here to build out. So there's a plan really to continue with the mining, expanding that mining fleet, whilst at the same time effectively building the treasury through the Bitcoin you will mine, but also capital raises and buying Bitcoin into treasury.
Yeah, so we have kind of scalable upside through selective mining, but I think I'm confident in saying we're a treasury-first company now.
Okay, good. And just finally, Hewie, if I can, just given your long history in this space, keen to get your opinion. We can go into more detail in another program, but just generally, what's going on in the Bitcoin space at the moment? I mean, I think it hit an all-time high yet again just last night, and it's sort of 111,000. But I'm getting a sense at the moment that there's something going on in the air. It just seems like there's suddenly a lot more chat, or there's companies who are just buying Bitcoin for treasury, and it seems to have come very all of a sudden, literally in the last almost week or two. So what's going on in your opinion?
Yeah, so this run on Bitcoin, if we compare it back to January's all-time high, which I think was 109K on the nose or roundabout, that was very much a spike based off the US election result. So it was kind of quite artificial, quite manufactured, and it was, I would say in hindsight, but it kind of seemed like it wasn't going to hold then, and it didn't hold. It came all the way back into the 80s. This run right now is very different, in my opinion. If you look at the liquidity and you look at the options market and you look at what's causing the run, i.e. all these, like you were saying, all these big capital market companies transferring to a treasury-first policy like us. And you have, the legacy guys like MicroStrategy, who have been continuously buying 9-figure sums, monthly, probably now weekly, he's doing it, I think. But you have all these new companies setting up. There's a couple of huge SPACs happening in America, Nakamoto and 21 shares. In the global markets, there's Metaplanet in Japan, which is buying vast amounts of Bitcoin. I think they bought $1 billion over the course of the last few months, or possibly a bit more. And then you've got the blockchain group in Paris. And we want to be the UK's answer to that kind of treasury play worldwide. In short, basically, this run has been very much driven up by capital markets companies buying Bitcoin for their balance sheets.
Right. Excellent. Seems like there is a bit of a shift at the moment. So it could be,
that Bitcoin, when you look at effectively, a lot of the Bitcoin market and the crypto market is driven by speculation, and people are kind of trading in and out. Most of this Bitcoin that's being bought up by these stock exchange listed companies, that's going away, into cold storage. That's not coming back out, right? That's more or less coming off the market. These guys announced this policy, with their companies, putting Bitcoin onto their balance sheet. They have to stick by that, in my opinion. You have to stick by that for 2, 3, 5, 10 years or more, because otherwise you just won't be taken seriously by your investors. You can't flip-flop about something like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Hewie, for your time today. So I'm looking forward to speaking to you quite a bit more on Vinanz and as we go forward. But Hewie Rattray, the CEO of Vinanz PLC, thank you very much for your time.
Cheers.
If you enjoyed this interview, then give us a thumbs up, a like or a retweet. Subscribe to us on YouTube or follow us on Twitter and hit that notification bell to be the first to know when we release new content. There's loads of great content on our website too, across all our programs at StockBoxMedia.com. Thank you for watching.